Hi, I'm Jonathan Stemmer, and welcome to the Healing Connection. Today I'm talking to Richard Blackstone, who is the author of Nuts and Bolts Spirituality, Waking Up the Sleepwalkers. And we're going to be talking about his book and finding out the difference between living what he considers to be an unconscious life and one where you are consciously choosing to create your life the way that you'd like to. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. It's just a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited, so thanks for having me on.
Why the name Nuts and Bolts Spirituality?
Well, it's interesting. When I started writing this book, I put out a little intention of what should I call it, because I knew the content of the book was going to be kind of like a spiritual primer. Basically, a book where people could get a really good idea of the concepts of spirituality, because that's where I was at the time that I wrote this. And during that process, I was guided to, one day, thought came in my head, so this is like the nuts and bolts of spirituality, isn't it? This is what you're writing about, isn't it? And I wrote that down, and I looked at it a few times, and I go, you know, I think that is a pretty cool name for a book, because basically it tells what the book is about. The book is about spiritual concepts and the process of waking up to your true authentic self. And so Nuts and Bolts Spirituality kind of encapsulates that, and the more I used the working title, the more I liked it.
Waking Up the Sleepwalkers.
Ah, yes.
I'm wondering if you at one time were a sleepwalker, and if so, if there was a particular point in your life when you had what would be considered an experience of waking up.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you the truth, Jonathan, that is the reason I wrote the subtitle, is because I was definitely a sleepwalker for about the first 40 years of my life. And what I mean by sleepwalker is that I was living my life very unconsciously. I've been conditioned to believe that you go to school, you get good grades, you work hard, you buy investments, you buy the right cars, but I never really achieved that thing that was gratifying, that was what I would call truly successful. And I didn't know why, because I was doing all the things I thought that my training and my conditioning had told me to do. And it wasn't until I started waking up to what I call my spiritual path that I really understood that I wasn't conscious in my living my life. And so when I realized that that's the way I had pretty much lived my life, I kind of was searching for a term to describe that, and I came across sleepwalking. And it just seemed to fit the bill. It really resonated with me, and the more I used it, the more it really encapsulated this idea of living your life in a very unconscious manner. And that, as compared to consciously creating your life, is why I use the term sleepwalker. And it's very effective in doing that. So
yeah, well, yeah. It's catchy too. I mean, certainly looking at the title and looking at the book itself, that was one of the things that I noticed right away, is the title.
Yes.
You mentioned consciously creating your life, and it's my understanding from reading bits of your book that you have a three-part foundation upon which you see things, which is based in love, the idea that we are one, and that we have the ability to consciously create the life that we would like to choose to have.
Exactly.
Can you say something about these concepts and how they work together?
Yeah, it's really cool how it came about, because once I started, discovering my own true identity, I, was still within a framework of my existing experience, which meant that I still had my same friends and peers, the occupation I worked with. And as I gained more insight into my own spiritual awakening, I started talking about it to my friends and people that were interested in they could see I was changing, so they would start asking me questions about what I believed. And as that happened, I knew that I needed some foundational concepts that I could fall back on and really rely on them to answer the questions that were pressing to not only my friends, but me. And so I made a conscious decision to seek clarity about what was important on my spiritual quest. And the more I sought clarity, and this is really cool how the creative process works, and we'll talk about that a little later too, the more I sought clarity on this foundational question of what are my principles that I'm going to stand on, the more I was led to these three core principles. And the first one is love. You know, what I discovered was that love is the core of our being. You know, what we are, our essence, is basically this concept called unconditional love. Now, our quantum physicists are discovering the same thing now, but they call it energy, and I call it love, but it's the same thing. Everything that exists comes from this one core concept, and the source of our existence is made up of this thing called unconditional love. So love is my first foundational principle. And then as you get deeply into love, what love tells you is that because love is really all there is, then we are basically one with this source called love. Everything in existence is one with love. And so this is really a core concept too that answers so many questions that are asked of me, and when I do my teaching, it just answers a lot of questions about why we do the things we do and how life really evolves. So we've got love as the first foundation, this idea that we're all one at the higher levels of our consciousness, and actually we're all one in a very physical way too, but that's a little deeper in another discussion. Okay. And then these two lead us right into this idea that what we're all here for is to create our lives in any manner that we choose. And so this idea of creation is just core to what we are as human beings.
Okay.
And so love, oneness, and creation are my three foundations, and any question that I'm asked, I can go to those foundational concepts and answer those questions.